Number 4, the US government is currently borrowing about 4 trillion US dollars per year. As they're borrowing 4 trillion US dollars this year, this means that the debt ceiling will need to be raised again. And that's why there's so much argument, there's so much debate that's going on right now in Congress. As you've seen it in TV, if you've been following the news, if the debt ceiling is not raised, which I think it will, it's just really Republicans and Democrats also wanting to have concessions or wanting to push whatever they have so that one side will actually give in. If the debt ceiling is not raised, the US government will default. In this video, let's talk about the US debt ceiling and what this means for stock investors. So basically, the debt ceiling is a limit on how much money the US government can borrow to pay its bills. So far, it's been raised 87 times since 1960, but it's currently set at 31.4 trillion US dollars, which is a staggering amount. If the debt ceiling isn't raised, the US government will default on its debt. A default on US debt would have a devastating impact on the US economy. It would likely lead to a recession, higher interest rates, and a decline in the value of the US dollars. So in this video, I want to give you also 10 things that you should know about the debt ceiling, analyze it for a bit, give you some explanation, then talk about what should stock investors do, and will the US actually default its debt? Then also give you an ending on how this should actually go and what should you do. So stick around and stay up until the end. So number 1, the debt ceiling is a limit on how much money the US government can borrow to pay its bills. The debt ceiling is a legislative limit on the amount of money that the US government can borrow. It is set by Congress and can be raised or suspended by a vote of both houses. The debt ceiling was created in 1917 as a way to prevent the government from overspending, which, if you've seen also over the past few years, they've massively spent more than what they're actually earning. And I don't know why they are in this predicament also right now. Number 2, the debt ceiling has been raised 87 times since 1960. The most recent one was December 2021. The debt ceiling is currently at 31.4 trillion. Number 3, the current debt ceiling is at 31.4 trillion US dollars, which is massive. Please do note that 10 years ago, if you're trying to be historical also about it, more than 11 years ago, last January 30, 2012, the debt ceiling was about 16.3 trillion US dollars. So in over a decade, they've more than doubled or almost doubled the debt ceiling as a whole. As its current debt ceiling is 31.4 trillion US dollars, this means that the US government is currently allowed to borrow up to 31.4 trillion to pay its bills. Number 4, the US government is currently borrowing about 4 trillion US dollars per year. As they're borrowing 4 trillion US dollars this year, this means that the debt ceiling will need to be raised again. And that's why there's so much argument, there's so much debate that's going on right now in Congress. As you've seen it in TV, if you've been following the news, if the debt ceiling is not raised, which I think it will, it's just really Republicans and Democrats also wanting to have concessions or wanting to push whatever they have so that one side will actually give in. If the debt ceiling is not raised, the US government will default on its debt. A default on US debt would have a devastating impact on the US economy. Number 6, a default on US debt would likely lead to a recession. A recession is a period of economic decline characterized by falling output, employment, and prices. A recession would have a negative impact on millions of Americans. A lot of people would lose their jobs, homes, and savings. But please do remember, not just that. If their credit rating would drop, it would lead to higher interest rates, which would lead to my next point. Number 7, a default on US debt would likely lead to higher interest rates. Interest rates are the cost of borrowing money. When interest rates rise, it becomes more expensive for businesses to borrow money to invest and expand. This can lead to slower economic growth. Number 8, a default on US debt would likely lead to a decline in the value of the US dollar. The US dollar is the world reserve currency. If you've been following me also for quite some time, we have been seeing threats from China trying to build their own, trying to push the world also to make something that's China-led as the global reserve currency. And you're seeing also the Saudis also start backing that up. As the US dollar is the world reserve currency, it means that it is used by many countries to trade, buy goods, cross-border, and also invest. When the value of the US dollar declines, it becomes more expensive for Americans to buy goods and services from other countries. So think about how much impact that actually has. Number 9, a default on US debt would likely lead to a loss of confidence in the US government. Investors and businesses would be less likely to invest in the US, which would lead to slower economic growth. And lastly, number 10, the US government, and this is I think super important, the US government has never defaulted on its debt. However, the government, and if you've been following me also throughout the years, the government has come close to defaulting on its debt several times in the past. In 2011, the government was able to reach a last-minute agreement to raise the debt ceiling and avoid its default. Please do note that this entire debt ceiling debacle is something that's very complex with far-reaching consequences. That's why it's very important to understand the debt ceiling and its potential impact on the US economy. I just want to add some items for good information for all of you. The debt ceiling was created in 1917 as a way to prevent government from overspending. The debt ceiling is set by Congress. The president can sign or veto a bill that raises the debt ceiling. If the debt ceiling is not raised, the government will not be able to pay its bills and will default on its debt. As stock investors or people even following crypto, what should you do? I believe these are a few things that are highly important. Number 1, stay informed. The best way to protect yourself from losses is to stay informed about the situation. This means following the news and reading analysis from financial experts. Next, diversify your portfolio. A diversified portfolio is less likely to be affected by one event, such as a debt ceiling crisis. This means investing in a variety of different assets, including stocks, bonds, and real estate. Number 3, rebalance your portfolio regularly. As your portfolio grows, it's important to rebalance regularly. This means selling some of your winners and buying some of your losers. This will help to keep your portfolio in line with your risk tolerance and your investment goals. Very important. Lastly, do not panic. It's important to remember that the stock market is volatile and there will be a lot of ups and downs. If you panic and sell your stocks when the market is down, you are likely to lock in your losses. Instead, it's important to stay calm and focus on the long term. Now, to the very important question, will the US actually default on its debt? To be honest, it's difficult to say with certainty whether the US will default on its debt. There are a number of factors that contribute to a default, including the political climate in the US, the gridlock in Congress. It's very hard to see how they reach an agreement also. The state of the US economy. If the economy is in a recession, it could be more difficult for the government to raise money it needs to pay its bills. The actions of other countries. If other countries lose confidence in the US government, they may be less willing to lend money to the US. If the US does default on its debt, it would be a devastating impact to the US economy. It would likely lead to a recession, higher interest rates, and a decline in the value of the US dollar. However, it's also possible that the US will avoid a default. The US government has a strong track record of paying its bills, and there's a lot of incentive for both parties in Congress to reach an agreement. Ultimately, the decision whether or not to raise a debt ceiling is up to Congress. It's a complex issue with far-fetching consequences, and it's important to be aware of the potential and risks of both options. But I do believe that they won't default. The largest economy in the world, as what I've mentioned earlier, they have a track record of all of this, and they would do everything that they can also to pay their bills. To put this to a close, the debt ceiling is a complex issue with far-reaching consequences. It's important to understand the debt ceiling and its potential to impact the US economy. If you are a stock investor, it is important to stay informed about the debt ceiling and its potential impact on the market. You can do this by following the news and reading analysis. You should diversify your portfolio, rebalance it regularly. Finally, it's important to remember that the stock market is volatile. It will have its up and downs. If you panic and you sell your stocks when the market is down, you will likely lock in your losses. It's important to stay calm and focus on the long term. I hope this is helpful. Thank you for watching. I do hope this video helps you trade well, trade strong, trade smart. See you all again soon, and God bless you all.